The excitement following the first appearance of the bat pony was spurred on following Lauren Faust's own explanation on the subject. According to the series creator, bat ponies are a cave-dwelling race native to an undefined mountain range. She also states that such ponies are employed by Princess Luna as guards to her palace. Given how these comments originate from around 2013, it is clear that numerous changes have been made to the show canon since that time, especially since Lauren Faust herself is no longer in charge of the series. Whether or not the intention was for Luna to have a separate palace to her sister, the phrase could just as easily apply to Canterlot Palace, since Luna does in fact share the residence with her sister. As yet, however, this is something we are yet to see for ourselves. The important side effect of Lauren Faust's words was to trigger an explosion of new fandom interpretations, a phenomenon that is not unknown to the show. In the midst of the excitement, however, numerous ideas floated to the surface, quickly forming their own brand of canonicity. Sometimes known as nocturnes, nocti, vespers, night ponies, negasai or nocturnal pegasi, and other times referred to under the name festrels or kestrels. Echoing their apparent inspiration, bat ponies are nocturnal, bat-winged sentient equines with apparent echolocating ability. Possessing a set of enlarged canines resembling fangs, their diet may consist of either blood or at least meat, fruit, insects, or any number of the above, with fruit being by far the most accepted likelihood. Such wide variations in diet have been explained as bat ponies having specific variants with different dietary requirements. Such a notion would also explain various other differences which will become very obvious, the most notable being the colour palette, with some variations being a mixture of mid-grey with dark-coloured wings and mane, likely taking inspiration from the original appearance, and others incorporating more varied and brighter colours that are much closer to that seen within the average pony of Equestria. Either way, a common feature of such depictions are the vocalizations, which are generally believed to be the sound generated as part of their echolocation, derived from their possible relatives. Some interpretations give such vocalizations the ability to break glass, among other things. They are often considered to be far more maneuverable in the air than their Pegasi counterparts, due predominantly to the observed flying capabilities of real-life bats. In many depictions, bat pony culture is built heavily around the moon, specifically the character of Luna, with some even deifying the character in their eyes. This association is derived from the only canon appearances by such forms, as well as their apparently nocturnal existence. Indeed, this one-off appearance has since been expanded to include all or most members of Luna's Night Guard in some interpretations. The bat ponies depicted as the guardians of the night. In many stories, bat ponies have relatively insular societies, based on ancient reoccurring traditions, kept alive due to a combination of their nocturnal existence and their mountain residence. Some interpretations of bat ponies give them a dialect and culture inspired by the real-life Romanian region of Transylvania. This connection is most likely derived from the region's long association with vampirism, one due in large part to Bram Stoker's famous literary creation. Chances are a lot of bat pony headcanons, including the possession of enlarged canine teeth, can be traced back to the association of said forms with the topic of vampires, an association derived from appearance. Using what we know so far, it is possible to create a map of potential areas of residence using the most recent version of the map of Equestria as released by the creators. This in itself is somewhat reliant on the notion that such a race is resident to the country. Indeed, others have suggested the Griffin territory or the mountains to the west. Considering as how pony civilization itself originated from beyond Equestria, this is not unlikely. At least 2 locations within the boundary of the continent have been highlighted as possible areas of residence. These include the region referred to as the Badlands and the town of Hollow Shades. Hollow Shades is pretty much the only surface settlement believed to harbour such a race. In fact, others have expanded on the idea of bat ponies being cave-dwelling to the point of carving out vast subterranean cities, the aforementioned Badlands being one such proposed site. Even the origin of such a race varies greatly, with some speculating that bat ponies were created by Princess Luna herself, and others preferring the notion that the race developed separately due to environmental conditions. Generally, bat ponies are seen to live somewhat separate lives from their counterparts, due primarily to their nocturnal nature. This element, however, is relatively flexible. The one thing everyone agrees on is that bat ponies are just ponies. Whether they be a new race, have their own culture, their own unique behavioural traits or way of seeing the world around them, they have hopes and dreams just like the rest of pony civilization. The brony fandom has a habit of forming collective constructs of various ideas around in-universe elements, and the show writers have a habit of listening. This is a theme that society has discussed numerous times in the past, and, although it does not always follow through, the few instances we have might be our best evidence in favour of bat ponies possessing an in-universe existence. The fact is, the ideas and physical additions built around this form have become so prevalent as to make the fandom bat pony a completely separate entity from its in-universe originator, and, by extension, practically anything else. Despite this, it must be remembered that there is no one clearly defined image of bat pony culture, and maybe there is an applicable in-universe explanation towards this. Given the wide variety of traits exhibited by such beings, it is logical to theorize that no one form of the bat pony race truly exists. Rather, bat ponies are just as diverse as many of the other races within Equestria, with different cultures, social systems, and maybe even attributes based on whichever colony they originate. Perhaps not all bat ponies possess the distinctive fangs that was such a point of contention regarding our original sighting. Establishing a definitive portrait of bat ponies as a concept is one thing. Actually locating an in-universe connection to such interpretations is quite another. For the purpose of this analysis, we shall focus on interpretations that can be directly linked to elements of the show's universe, whether from actual episodes or related media. From there, we shall identify possible patterns and differentiations. As such, what can we derive from the most prevalent of such interpretations? Our closest connection to the bat pony race is Luna's night guard, of which we have seen two forms, the unicorns and the aforementioned bat ponies, with both being distinguished by the design of their armour as well as their physical characteristics. As of yet, we have only glimpsed examples of the latter design once in the main timeline, while the former has had numerous appearances, including following the takeover by Cozy Glow. This would appear to immediately cast doubt on the idea of an army of bat ponies at Luna's command, since, if ever there was a time it would most likely be witnessed, it would be in the late evening when these events were taking place. Even the idea of such a race comprising Luna's bodyguard seems to fall short, for in the time since then we have seen no examples of said bodyguards accompanying Luna in more recent times. Considering as how most sightings of the character occur in the daytime, with almost no nighttime sightings occurring outside the dream realm, the supposed nocturnal existence would go some ways to explain that. Even then, it does still seem strange that they would not appear alongside Luna to help arrest a villain so infamous they apparently felt the need to banish her to Tartarus at the end of school rays. Then again, this might easily be explained by the fact that the sun had only recently gone down if we stick to the idea of bat ponies being highly light sensitive. If we assume the rest of the royal army set off prior to sundown, then, realistically speaking, there would not be enough time to set off with the others once the sun had really set. Even then, however, we should not be this strapped for evidence regarding an entire population existing in addition to the main races. If we stick to the main timeline, the indication seems to be that only 2 bat pony members of the Royal Guard have ever appeared in public, at least on screen. In the end, we are left with 2 possibilities. Either such forms were indeed a decorative design, perhaps one employed for Nightmare Night, or such a race is indeed employed by Luna as part of her guard, but rarely appears in public. Such a race could be somewhat shy, preferring to avoid interaction with the ponies of Equestria, something that would not be at odds with our previously discussed real-life example. There is, however, a much more uncomfortable possibility. Considering as how the initial appearance of such forms in addition to Luna's arrival evoked a great deal of fear amongst the local populace, perhaps their subsequent absence was a desperate attempt to rectify Luna's troubling image. Perhaps the ponies of Equestria simply do not like bat ponies. The topic of prejudice is not unknown to many depictions of bat ponies. Even in stories where some of the darker headcanons surrounding the race, including vampirism, are not directly utilized, oftentimes they will exist as in-universe myths and rumors spread amongst the main races. Considering as how such forms do not appear to form an everyday fact of life in Equestria, it's not unreasonable to question whether they would even be welcomed by the main pony races. Indeed, prejudice as a theme is one that has been tackled fairly recently, and in numerous different ways. Perhaps a problematic social climate might make the idea of incorporating bat ponies into pony society seem like a difficult prospect. In a reverse of the previously discussed topic of bat ponies being Pegasi with decorative spells applied to give them their appearance, could some of the many night guards we have seen actually be bat ponies made to look like quote-unquote normal ponies? The sad fact is, if such a race does exist, they may have had good reason for hiding themselves from the ponies of Equestria. With more recent in-universe storylines focusing on overcoming such prejudice, however, actual interaction seems like a much stronger prospect, at least from a storytelling point of view. Again, this is mostly just speculation, the topic being hard to gauge with the limited evidence. But what if the bat ponies we have seen are indeed merely decorative costumes worn for Nightmare Night? We have seen examples of different races or intelligent species being utilized for decorative purposes. Thus, could the same apply? And if so, where might the bat ponies actually be residing? The name Hollow Shades was first mentioned in passing within the episode Apple Family Reunion, where it was stated that at least some members of the Apple family lived there. Seek Hollow Shades on the officially released map of Equestria. You will inevitably locate a small, dimly lit settlement shrouded by dense foliage, located northwest of Philadelphia in the shadow of Fall Mountain. A small, dark village shrouded on all sides by rich vegetation and surrounded by mountains. It seemed as if the equestrian home of the mythical bat ponies had finally been found. That is, until the episode Shadowplay. In the aforementioned episode, the elements of harmony were drawn to a town of the same name in pursuit of the Pony of Shadows. This town, however, was located between the Smoky Mountains and what seems to be Lost Pegasus on the complete opposite side of the continent. Geographic inconsistencies aside, this version of Hollow Shades bears a marked difference from its counterpart, being a long-abandoned settlement rather than an active colony, as implied on the official map of Equestria. Even the foliage that was such a prominent feature of Hollow Shades is non-existent. Even if we consider the implied changes that came about as a result of the Pony of Shadows' arrival, one would expect more evidence if such a location were indeed the heart of a dense forest. Yet we have nothing but a few bushes and dried trees. The strangest thing is, Applejack herself brings up the understanding that members of her family live there, in the same episode, only to be corrected by Sunburst. So even the main characters are aware that there is a discrepancy. The question is, what would cause this? The term Phantom Settlement covers real-world instances of towns that appear on maps, but do not actually exist. This usually arises from minor errors during the creation of said maps and other times deliberately introduced as a means of uncovering plagiarism at a later date. This is what is known as a copyright trap. The problem with this explanation in regards to Hollow Shades is that we get direct confirmation of residence in the form of a reply letter in Apple Family Reunion, a reply that had to have been instigated. So not only do we have messages that are implied to be from this place, but letters that are actively still being delivered there. Something that is unlikely to happen in the case of an abandoned or non-existent settlement. A possible reason for the discrepancy could be something as simple as a second town called Hollow Shades, built following the abandonment of the first. This possibility would go some ways to explain Applejack's confusion. Indeed, it is interesting to note that the title of the location in Shadowplay is always referred to as the Hollow Shades, rather than just Hollow Shades, implying a possible differentiation and adding weight to the theory. Given how Hollow Shades is so hard to find compared to its counterpart, being easily confused with the dilapidated locality, what does that say about its inhabitants? Why would they make themselves so hard to find? The implication is that they are private, rarely interacting with the rest of Equestria, except for a member of the apple family, a family known for their agricultural prowess. This is just one interpretation, but considering the available evidence, it's one that does appear to make sense. As such, this might yet provide an inkling of proof towards just such a possibility as a relatively unseen pony race existing within one of the more remote regions of the equestrian continent. As yet though, this still remains theoretical. However, it is worth stating for the record that something strange is definitely going on in regards to this settlement. If Hollow Shades is indeed the Hollow Shades, and we limit our evidence to that which the animated series itself provides, that still leaves the question: who received, and more importantly responded, to the invitation? Even if there is not a race of bat ponies involved, this town has some questions that remain unanswered. As such, any theories are welcome. It is theorized by some that bat ponies are not a part of Equestria itself, living within a mountainous region to the west, where exploration is deemed impossible. The undiscovered West is perhaps the most mysterious region on the Equestrian map. Apparently yet to be explored, it is easy to see how its inhabitants could have developed independently from the ponies of Equestria. However, further analysis of this region gives us something of an anomaly. The fact is, the land bridge that seems to connect the Equestrian continent to some other landmass, so far, does not appear to exist in universe. This detail appears on the most recent version of the official map of Equestria, while earlier releases show no such land bridge. This extends to in-universe maps of the continent, including the Friendship map. To all intents and purposes, this land does not exist. Yet this detail was added in the most recent update, in conjunction with the MLP movie. The implication is that such a strip of land is not merely uncharted, it is literally undiscovered. Why is this? In all the years Equestria has existed, how has no one noticed? Our best guess is that this feature is one added for the benefit of a plot point that, as of this video being released, has yet to fully materialize. The most likely explanation given the evidence provided by the Friendship map is that said land bridge was submerged at some point in the past, although this does not explain the presence of pre-existing foliage if the officially released map is anything to go by. If anything, this seems to indicate the land is still there but just isn't visible. Taking this evidence into account, we are left with another curious possibility, that the landmass itself could have been deliberately hidden from view by an intelligent culture, one that did not wish itself known to the ponies of Equestria. Our oldest map of Equestria dates back to a relatively brief period of time following the conflict that occurred between the main races, allowing us to confirm exactly how long such a spell would have had to have been in place. Over 1,000 years. Given the history of Equestria through the context of the hearth-warming play, it is not hard to see how such a decision would arise from an outsider's perspective, at least at the time. If we follow up on the notion of bat ponies being resident to the undiscovered West, it is even easier to see how their interaction with the ponies of Equestria could be so minimal, although we are naturally left to wonder, could they actually be responsible for a spell that powerful? Such an idea relies on proving that bat ponies have the capabilities to utilize magic. As yet, most headcanons agree that such a race has more in common with Pegasi than unicorns. Then, around April 2018, someone noticed an odd detail in a recently released copy of the Ponyville Mysteries book series. Further investigation points to this book being Cursed Crusaders, the 5th entry in the series. The segment itself depicting a vision of a country called Trotsylvania. What caught their attention was the mention of an alicorn statue designed with bat-like wings. This can be interpreted as either an in-universe form of artistic creativity or a subjective interpretation of Nightmare Moon, who, for the record, does not actually have bat wings. Nevertheless, the possible connection to bat ponies did not go unnoticed, and the fact that it was a piece of officially released media made the connection all the more interesting. While the concept of alicornism among bat ponies is far from new, the idea of such an element quite possibly having a canon instance leads to many questions and still more possibilities. Combined with the mystery of the undiscovered West anomaly, it paints a picture that is far too fascinating not to at least consider. Could there be something off Equestria's west coast that the inhabitants of the country can't see? After all, an alicorn is easily powerful enough to cloak an entire continent from view, if they so wished. Perhaps as a means of protecting their kingdom from the various enemies that Equestria has to face, or even from Equestria itself. Again, this is far from direct confirmation. However, it is at least a matter worth further consideration. If a bat pony alicorn is possible, perhaps they might have a similar role to the princesses of Equestria. On a related note, would communication exist between these two societies in such a scenario? Or, much like what happened with the Yaks of Yakyakistan, maybe they have simply closed off their borders for the past 1,000 years. It is worth remembering that as of yet we do not have a full in-universe connection to this region. Indeed, even the country of Trotsylvania, the home of the bat-winged alicorn statue, has very little in terms of a clue in regards to its in-universe location. As such, how canon such books are is anyone's guess. Whatever the implications, the undiscovered West anomaly is regarded as a matter worth further observation. As with before, any theories are welcome. As yet, there is just as much evidence against such a race as there is in favour. Really, only time will tell whether it'll ever truly become canon. With the recent lean towards world building, such a possibility still exists, although for the time being the creators remain hesitant to really confirm such a possibility in universe. A number of explanations have been raised for this, but the overall fact remains the same. An actual canon appearance by such forms would have to be so well calculated as to not incur the ire of a major portion of the community as to make the reward to risk ratio seem somewhat skewed. Now granted, we have seen the show take similar risks in the past, with mixed results. If we take one of their more recent and more successful examples, the difference between the topic of bat ponies and that of the Apple family parents is that the fandom was in no way divided on whether Applejack's parents ever existed. The same cannot be said for the former. So, in the end, who exactly are the show writers meant to listen to? Given how the series itself is due to draw to a close following season 9, perhaps vague illusions are the closest we'll ever get to a satisfactory answer. As of this video being released, no concrete evidence exists that bat ponies are truly canon. From the Society's perspective, it is interesting to note that, of all entities previously discussed within this series, the bat pony might come closest to fitting the cultural niche of a cryptid within the Brony fandom. Whether or not they truly exist in universe as their own pony race doesn't really matter, as they'll forever remain within the hearts of many a member of the fandom, with new theories and stories likely to continue spreading amongst the vast community. Could it be, somewhere within a secluded mountain range, an unexplored country, or a shadowy forest, there exists a nocturnal and diverse race of equines that, for the most part, keep to themselves? Or could it be that the mysterious bat ponies of Equestria are nothing more than a myth?
Thank you, mares and gentle colts, and I do hope you enjoyed this evening's festivities. I do hope to see you here again next year.
Okay, yeah, I really did pull this look off, do I? A big thank you to Patrick Poe for allowing me to use his song as part of the soundtrack. While he apparently no longer makes new music, what he has got is worth a listen if you're interested. I have to admit, I was really kinda nervous about this one, especially since there's such an influential topic in the fandom. In terms of sources, I got most of the information to present here off the Bat Pony wiki, numerous discussion pages on the topic, and a number of fanfics I read during the course of this. Though considering there's over 300 of them, chances are I probably missed something. If you feel there's something important I missed, don't keep it to yourself, bring it up. I might even cover it in a part 3 at some point. At the very least, I hope I didn't do the topic a disservice. I never want to end up doing that. Now, if you actually read the author's notes at the end of the last video, you'll probably already know I'm going on something of a hiatus, in terms of making new videos at least. I hope to still interact with the fandom, it's just, I am actually at university at the moment, and It has become blatantly clear that I can't really keep up with both the workload and making these videos, which honestly are just for fun, really. As such, I finally managed to pull myself away from this, at least for the time being. Now, the term usually ends at around December, which is when I should be available to start making new videos. I do have ideas for what sort of topics I might be able to cover in December, although I'm probably going to have to rethink how I make these. Sorry. And heck, by then I'll probably have come up with a much better design for my OC, or Pony or whatever you call them. Well, I guess there's really only one way to end all this, and that's by saying thank you. Thank you to Equestria Daily for giving my more recent videos more of a spotlight, and even accepting the videos to begin with, honestly. A thank you to 1 Year of the Dog, who made some suggestions that allow me to improve the audio in more recent videos. Probably needed that. Thanks. I know I've already said this, but another big thank you to Nightmare Muffin for collaborating. I'd never done any kind of collaboration like that before, so it was kind of a learning experience. Thank you to Raven Mad for sharing episode 7 on the Rift Cafe website. I made sure to make my own submissions since then, well, since episode 9 technically, but in any case, thanks. It's really hard to know if you have an audience if no one's seeing your videos, so that really did help a lot. It's funny, I never even imagined having an online presence like this. I was terrified of even having an identity amongst the fandom. Not your fault, I'm just like that. Yet so far, whether it's people who just happen to click on my video, or those who choose to subscribe to my channel, or who I may end up working with on a project, even just those I interact with outside this channel. So far all I've seen is evidence that the Brony fandom is just as kind and welcoming as it's so often been described as. For all the experience I've had so far, thank you. All of you. Oh, this again? Who is it? Hello? What? Okay, you can stop now. What, the actual name Celeste?